Let's Science is brought to you by the StarQuest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give.
3, 2, 1.
We live in a universe of scientific wonders.
Every day, scientists are inching towards breakthroughs which can change our lives.
We're playing our small part in sharing these wonders with you.
That's why today is a fine day for science.
So let's science.
Caroline, I'm going to throw it over to you. I'm a little bit wary about this, and I'm having the heebie-jeebies already. But anyway, Caroline, I'm going to throw it over to you so you can talk about science. What is the topic for today, Caroline?
Okay, so mutant Daddy Shortlegs created in a lab. What?
Whoa. Excuse me, I've got somewhere else I need to be right now.
Okay, so look, this was just an article that caught my eye and it was pretty interesting. I thought, let's talk about something completely different and have a bit of fun with it. So there's been a group of scientists that have created a Daddy Shortlegs. So we know about this spider, the Daddy Longlegs, right? So they've been doing a bit of an experiment with them. So it's a stunted version of the household spider, and they've been doing experiments by suppressing the genes that code for the long legs of the spider. You know what? I thought before going into the experiment, I'd talk a little about the Daddy Longlegs spider. So if you're not into spiders, stay and listen anyway, because it's pretty interesting, okay? So there are several species of Daddy Longlegs spiders.
Oh, wow.
And they've been actually around on the Earth for about 400 million years. Okay, so they're not a new species. In Australia, so I'll talk about the Australian one. In Australia, the most common species is the Pholcus phalangioides. And it's actually imported from Europe, okay? And it's probably, through, movement of cargo or people or stuff like that. So the spider, the Daddy Longlegs, as we all call it, has 8 extremely long, thin legs and a small body. I'm sure everybody's seen this spider around the place. They are found in urban areas and they make these kind of messy webs. You've probably seen them before and you're like, what kind of a web is that? Usually other spiders make beautiful, ornate, round and
symmetric,
hexagonal, symmetrical webs. These just make like...
They're more of the Picasso of spiders.
Yes, they're quite artistic. These guys are not that artistic. But nevertheless, they are still interesting. They feed on other insects and spiders, which is actually good because if you keep them in your house, you've got a form of natural pest control. So don't go squashing these guys when you see them. Just let them stay in your house.
I've always thought Daddy Longlegs were the good guys of spiders.
They are.
Yeah.
So they tend to live in areas where they can't be disturbed, such as like under your furniture, in sheds, in garages, in the corner of the ceilings. That's usually where you see it in your house. There'll be like, if you look up, everybody now, have a look up on your ceiling, have a look in the corner and just check. You may have a Daddy Longlegs sitting there. Guys, you got one?
No, not
No?
yet. Not yet.
I'm sure you'll get one soon.
My study is like a box, so it's not really a spider friendly. There's some webs up there. Could be one. Yeah, anyway.
There you go. Could be.
Cool.
So, so I recently had 2 in my bathroom, okay, and I did leave them there. They were quite okay. They were just sitting in their corners. The silly little things decided that they'd ventured down to the floor while my cat, Chocolate Rocket Chips, decided to have a little bit of a play, and he ate them. So, yeah, I was actually a bit sad about that. I don't know why they decided to come down, but anyway, they did, and I didn't see them in time, and they got eaten. Anyway, so I'm sure another couple will come and take their place.
Take their place.
Yes. So these Daddy Longlegs, now you guys have probably seen this before. So when you disturb them in their web, they start to get into like a very fast spinning motion. Have you seen this? So you touch their web and they just like, it's not that actually the web is moving, it's the spider. So as the spider moves, it gets really, really blurry when you're looking at it. It's probably a kind of a defense mechanism. And so that's a really cool fact. And you've probably heard the myth that the spider has the most toxic venom of all spiders.
That's the common thing that goes around.
Common misconception. Well, and that's probably because they are capable of killing other spiders and consuming them. But this isn't true. Their venom is like very, very, well, it doesn't kill you. So if you're going to hold one, it's fine. Don't worry about it. So the Mythbusters show, remember Mythbusters?
Yes.
That was pretty cool.
Great show. Great show.
They didn't blow one up, did they?
They didn't blow it up.
Oh.
Imagine that tiny spider explosion. Anyway, so what they did was they tested out whether their little fangs, so their fangs are only about 0.25 millimeters long. They wanted to see if they could pierce human skin. And it was found out that they could. So they got bitten.
My goodness me.
But
Ouch.
turns out the bite is very short-lived. And, it's a very short-lived sting and they didn't get poisoned. So, but please don't go testing out spiders on your hand to see if they bite, because we do all know what a daddy longlegs looks like, but just in case you get a different one, please don't get bitten. So I'm not endorsing holding spiders for the point of getting bitten.
Yes.
Anyway.
Yes. Yep.
So that
I'll
was
go
just
one further.
Yeah.
I'm not endorsing holding spiders at all.
Yeah. No. And I'm assuming people are just going to go hold spiders. Most people don't even want to look at a spider, so that's I'm probably safe there. So, okay, so let's get into this research. So some research was performed by a group of scientists at the University of Wisconsin-Madison in the United States, led by Guillaume Garnett, and he was the lead author of a paper they published in the journal Proceedings of Royal Society B on August 4th. So it's a relatively new paper. So their aim, not just because they wanted to play around and see if they could make Daddy Longlegs Daddy Shortlegs, but it was more to understand more about these creatures, the way they've evolved, and their way of locomotion and their body plan, on the genetic level. It turns out that Daddy Longlegs spiders don't actually use all 8 of their legs to walk.
Oh, wow.
So they use the back 3 pairs of legs are for walking, but the longest pair at the front are actually used for waving and feeling their way around the environment. You've probably seen them. If you see them walk around, you probably notice that they do wave their front legs around.
Yep.
So the experiment. So the genome of the species, so the species they used was Phalangium opilio, and they first mapped the genome of the spider. And it took them about 2 years to do this because there were about 580 million base pairs in the spider genome.
Goodness me. You okay?
Yeah.
That makes sense.
So what they did then was to compare this genome map of the spider to that of other insect genomes, such as the fruit fly, which is Drosophila melanogaster. And now if you're into biology, you'll probably know that the fruit fly has been experimented a lot in genetic terms. So they do kind of like, what happens if we move this gene? Oh, no wings. Or what happens if we do this? Oh, no legs. So they have been experimenting on this fly for quite a while. So they know quite a lot about it. So what they did is they looked for the genes that were likely to code for legs. And they found a group of genes called HOX genes. And 2 of these genes called DFD and SCR. And these code for the leg development in spider embryos. So they weren't sure if they had to turn off both genes or a combination of on and off genes to change the shape of the legs or the size of the legs. It turns out that turning off both the DFD and SCR genes resulted in the 3 pairs of the walking legs to be shortened, and it changed their shape a bit as well. Another manipulation of the genes turned the legs into structures called pedipalps, which help the spiders to eat their food. So that was interesting.
Yeah.
And then in some embryos or embryo spiders, not all the legs were shortened. And they think this is because there's another HOX gene that probably has an influence on the leg length too. So I guess they also kind of confirm that you can have a gene that codes for something, but there may be a gene somewhere else that helps in the coding or the expression of a gene in an organism. So that's pretty interesting. So some of their little embryos managed to hatch after genetic manipulation, but unfortunately they did all die after adulthood, which just shows you can't manipulate something and expect it to live. You need it. It needs to be intact the way God made it, the way it was created naturally. So so that was quite an interesting study, and now they hope in the future to maybe do some further studies to clarify how other structures, such as the fangs, are formed, and that kind of thing. So I just thought that was an interesting study and something, just to, I guess it helps in learning about evolutionary biology, how things evolved, how genes code, the way, just some more research into what happens when you manipulate genes. And it's a good thing they're doing these things on insects, and not on animals, which they do, but I don't want to talk about that because it's just And it's just interesting. Anyway.
Yeah, and we've always talked about a lot, because we love space science so much. We always do things on on that huge universal level, but on the microscopic level, things are just as interesting, aren't they?
Well, there's a whole world there. I mean, if you look at the interactions of molecules together, and it's a whole system on its own. I mean, the biochemistry system is just amazing. When you affect one molecule, it'll affect other molecules. You affect on the genetic level, and it affects the whole. What comes next after that. Expressions of genes and the production of proteins, and how it affects the function of an organism. So it really just shows the cause and effect of that. Yeah, it's a really interesting study, and it's quite complex, but and I just explained it on the basic level, but nevertheless, quite interesting.
Yeah, I might just tack on a very quick bit of space news.
Yes.
So I try and keep up with what's happening in the world of space, as we all do every so often. So there's just yesterday, so while I was at uni, now full confession, so while I was at uni online studying, there happened to be a rocket launch at the same time, so I managed to watch both. Obviously, one had to be muted, and it wasn't uni. But an up and coming company called Firefly. They are trying to do the same thing, and in different iterations of Rocket Lab, of becoming a small satellite launcher. So they're in the small satellite business. I looked at their website. They're actually building all kinds of different variants of rockets, not large ones, but ones for small satellite launch, ones that can do different kinds of trajectories. They're building a moon lander for landing equipment on the moon, not for people, but NASA has already got a contract with them for the potential of what it can do. So they did a test launch of their Alpha rocket, which is the first rocket that they'll be producing. Now, it's a test, and it failed after 2 minutes of flight. So they had to detonate the rocket because one of they say it's an anomaly, so they don't know what happened yet, but the rocket started sort of spinning out of control. It was, basically it was dangerous from that point. So they had to, I'm assuming they remote detonated it. That's what you'd have to do next. Otherwise, it could hit a civilian population, a city, things like that. So that's, which is why they have the ability to detonate it while it's up in the air. So the important thing that they mentioned was that they've got 2 solid minutes of flight data. The rocket exploded just before going supersonic. So it had just gotten out of max Q, or the maximum dynamic pressure. And it was at that moment that something went wrong. So they'll be poring over the data to see what happens there. But it was a very exciting flight to watch this thing take off and do what it was able to do. So from here now, they'll do more testing, and it'll be back on the pad. And I think one thing that's important to remember, because I looked at headlines and things. The headlines are usually, Firefly Alpha rocket test ends in explosion, ends in failure. These explosions during the testing phase are not failures. That's why it's called testing.
Well, that's true.
They've put it together. They've put in the parameters that they think will work. They've done testing on the ground. They've done their static fires, but you won't actually know what this machine is capable of doing until you launch it.
Launch it. Yeah, makes sense.
So a lot of rockets in their test phases have exploded before actually being successful. There's been a rare number of rockets that have made it on their first flight into space, but sometimes that's because they're based on previous platforms that have already worked. But when you're building a whole new platform from the beginning, especially during the testing phase, it's not going to be successful. So in this case, it wasn't, and it's nothing to be sad or upset about. It's actually it's something to say, here's another rocket company that is getting closer and closer to space with each attempt.
Well, they do find a lot of information, don't they? With these explosions, they have a lot of measurements and things, so they know how to correct it next time. So
yeah, these things are packed with sensors as well, and also with the design of the carbon composites, whatever they're using as the shell of the rocket's body as well. to see how it stacks up in different amounts of pressure as it's launched as well. So that they'll get data on that, on how their engines performed, that there's all this information for them now to pore over, and now they make adjustments for the next test until they get it right. If you want to see an example of a company that blows things up often in order to get it right, look at SpaceX.
Yes.
Just look at their history.
The first few, what was it now? The Starship,
yeah.
They were fun, but they learned a lot.
Yeah, it took 4 flights before they were actually able to land one properly without it detonating or anything like that. Yeah. So there's a lot of things there, yeah.
Let's Science is brought to you by StarQuest Media and is a fortnightly podcast that brings you the scientific wonders of our universe from a distinctly Catholic point of view. For more from Caroline, Lindsay, and friends, listen to the StarQuest show, Catholics of Oz. Find links from today's show at sqpn.com/science and find the Catholics of Oz at sqpn.com/Oz. Be sure to follow the show in Apple Podcasts, Google Play, wherever you can find podcasts, or on the SQPN YouTube channel. The generous donations of our patrons at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue Let's Science and all the shows at StarQuest, which makes our nonprofit mission possible. You can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. Join us next time for more scientific wonders, and thank you for listening to Let's Science on StarQuest.